I'd like to share a revelation that I've had during my time here. It came to me when I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply and multiply until every natural resource is consumed. And the only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague.
The first time industrialized countries started to question the impact their economies might have on the environment was at this 1972 UN conference on the human environment led by Maurice F. Strong.
The very fact that the conference began with 113 participating countries with very high-level delegations from those countries, this in itself represented a very significant step forward, because this demonstrated more than anything else the real concern of the majority of countries in the world. And those countries which did not participate in the conference did not remain away because they were disinterested in the issue. They remained away because of another political issue that didn't have any direct relevance to environment. So those who were here because they were interested. Those who were not here because they weren't interested in the environment issue.
Maurice Strong, the founder of the United Nations Environmental Program, Secretary General of the United Nations, Conference on the Human Environment, and launched the Green Movement.
One day, between the time he moved out of a cave and into a high-rise apartment, man invented the city. In the year 1000, there were about a dozen cities of 100,000 people. By 1800, 6 times that many. And the more cities man built, the more problems there were. Housing, transportation, congestion, pollution. In 1925, 1/4 of us lived in cities. Today, over half. By the year 2000, 2/3 of us will live in urban areas. Our cities will be twice the size they are today. We must build the equivalent of today's world on top of the one we already have. But it is not built yet. Now is the time to plan. This message brought to you by the United Nations Environment Program.
Good. In 1992, at the Earth Summit in Rio, Maurice F. Strong said that the human species was out of control.
We are now a species out of control.
Later on in the 21st century, a guy most of us are probably familiar with comes on the scene to tell us that the ethnics of our economy is running the environment. Al Gore.
All right.
The same guy that claimed to invent the internet.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
I'm here to educate you about the single biggest threat to our planet. You see, there is something out there which threatens our very existence and may be the end to the human race as we know it.
Look at the 10 hottest years ever measured. They've all occurred in the last 14 years. The hottest of all was 2005.
Hello, I'm Al Gore, and I'm here to scare you about global warming. If we don't take immediate action, our planet, Earth, will become a deadly smog ball that chokes out all human life. Look, it's all in my movie.
You're in a movie? What do you play?
America has always been at war, whether it was the Cold War, World War II, or Vietnam War. But since then, those conflicts are over, and the bamboo curtain is raised, and the iron curtain is raised with the war on terrorism. It's also the war on the environment. You have environmental terrorists such as Al Gore saying, give us a carbon tax or the world will be destroyed.
Is it possible that we should prepare against other threats besides terrorists?
The biggest factor of climate change legislation is the carbon tax.
Wonderful state, and you talked a little bit about people have to have trust in what you're doing, and I think you know that this bill is going to fundamentally change the way America works, and it's going to affect families. We've all talked about how it affects individuals and what it's going to do to their budgets and what it's going to do to jobs in this country. And given the magnitude of those changes, I think it's really important that no suspicion or shadow fall on the foremost advocates of climate change legislation. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of clear the air about your motives and maybe set the record straight for some of your former constituents. And I've got an article from October 8th, New York Times Magazine, about a firm called Kleiner Perkins, a capital firm called Kleiner Perkins. Are you aware of that company?
Well, yes, I'm a partner at Kleiner Perkins.
So you're a partner in Kleiner Perkins. Okay. Now, they have invested about $1 billion in 40 companies that are going to benefit from cap-and-trade legislation. So is the legislation that we are discussing here today, is that something that you are going to personally benefit from?
I believe that the transition to a green economy is good for our economy and good for all of us. And I have invested in it.
What will carbon tax cost America as far as jobs and money?
Look, I will stipulate that CO2 concentrations are going up. There's no debate about that. They're about 380 parts per million, and they're going to rise to in the neighborhood of 500 parts per million in the next 50 to 100 years. I'll stipulate that. Now, the consequences of that, and whether that's because of man-made CO2, I think are debatable. And I don't know about this scientific peer review that you just talked about, but if somebody lied about something 14 years ago, I'm sure Mr. Waxman and Mr. Markey will conduct an investigation and oversight hearing into that. My question to you was about the cost of the allowance system. How are we going to pay for it, and how many jobs are we going to lose? Now, if you've got information about something that happened 14 years ago, I'm sure, again, our chairman and subcommittee chairman, Mr. Stupak, who's the oversight subcommittee chairman, we'll look at it. But answer my question about the cost, please.
It's on the front page of the New York Times today. $14 years.
Mr. Vice President, I did not hear your answer to Mr. Barton's question. What is the cost of this bill to every American family?
Well, the study that I think that is most authoritative, before taking into account the savings in their energy use that this bill will occasion,
I'm running out of time. We talk about carbon polluters. You talk about them. It's my understanding that back in 1997, when you were vice president, Enron's CEO, Ken Lay, was involved in discussions with you at the White House about helping develop this type of policy, this trading scheme. And is that accurate? Is it inaccurate? It's been reported.
I don't know, but I met with Ken Lay, as lots of people.
That I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got. President?
You can see why so many of us are concerned about this type of cap-and-trade energy tax that would be literally turning over this country's energy economy.
I didn't know him well enough to call him Kenny Boy.
Well, but you knew him well enough to help devise this trading scheme, and obviously we know what Enron and these big guys on Wall Street like Goldman Sachs, and I know you've got interest with Goldman Sachs.
No.
These people, well, that's been reported. Is that not accurate?
No, I wish I did.
With executives from you're partnered in companies with executives from Goldman Sachs. Well, With executives from you're partnered in companies with executives from Goldman Sachs. Well, if you're not, either way, Enron clearly had an interest in doing this when they were around. We saw what they did. And when you see the types of people involved in wanting to set up this kind of scheme, you can see why so many of us are concerned about turning our energy economy over to a scheme that was devised by companies like Enron and some of these Wall Street firms that have wrecked our financial economy.
I don't really know if you want me to respond to that. I guess what you're trying to say, you're trying to
I mean, clearly there will be big winners and big losers.
You're trying to say there's some kind of guilt by association? Is that
not association? I'm saying that there are going to be big winners and big losers in this bill, and that's been discussed by everybody talking. Big winners and big losers. But some of the big winners are some of the very financial experts that help destroy our financial marketplace. And I think that should be noted that companies like Enron helped come up with this trading scheme that would
Why should we regulate the economy? Unregulated Russian coal plants would kick out so much pollution that it would leave cities in a layer of soot. If there were more regulations on energy producers, we wouldn't have accidents like the BP oil spill or the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, Ukraine in 1986.
Ask friends and family, hey, should we ban hydrogen monoxide? It's bad for the environment. The average person would sign your petition asking for the banning of water. Same thing with table salt or sodium fluoride. They give it a big scary name so that the establishment can scare you with it. Ooh, carbon dioxide. When in truth, carbon dioxide is one of the 4 factors of life: oxygen, water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide. If the establishment can tax one of the basic elements of life, they can regulate and control every facet of our lives. The idea that carbon is a pollutant is essentially saying that humanity is a disease. That's why there are articles in the New York Times saying that babies are little carbon monsters. The environment movement is the new age zeitgeist and is anti-human doctrine.